Commander Richard Hayes stared at the blinking monitor, his tired eyes reflecting the strange patterns that had captured the attention of every scientist at Arecibo Observatory. For 3 days, the signal had persisted, a rhythmic series of pulses that couldn't be explained by any natural cosmic phenomenon. "We need to call Washington," Dr. Samantha Wright said, brushing her graying hair from her face. "These patterns are too organized to be random." Richard nodded, the weight of their discovery settling on his shoulders. "Run it through the algorithm one more time. I want to be absolutely certain." The massive dish of the Arecibo radio telescope had picked up the signal from a star system 30 light-years away. At first, they thought it might be equipment malfunction, but as hours stretched into days, the evidence became undeniable. "Sir," called Alex Robinson, a young analyst who had barely slept in 24 hours, "I've isolated the frequency. It's definitely artificial. Someone is trying to communicate." News of the signal spread quickly despite government attempts to keep it quiet. Amateur astronomers around the world began pointing their equipment to the same coordinates. Within a week, the president addressed the nation from the Oval Office. "My fellow Americans, we are not alone in the universe," she said, her voice steady despite the historic nature of her words. "We have received communications from an advanced civilization, and we are working to understand their message." At the hastily assembled International Response Center, linguists, mathematicians, and scientists worked around the clock. Dr. Carol Davis, a brilliant xenolinguist, made the first breakthrough. "It's a mathematical sequence," she explained to the room of bleary-eyed experts. "They're establishing a common language based on universal constants." Brilliant, really. The world held its breath as humanity crafted its reply. Schools closed for what was dubbed Contact Day. Religious leaders offered prayers. Military forces went on high alert. "We should be cautious," warned General Frank Miller during the UN emergency session. Throughout history, first contact between civilizations has rarely benefited the less advanced society. His concerns were noted but outweighed by the excitement of the scientific community. Earth's unified response was transmitted 6 weeks after receiving the initial signal. Then they waited. Richard returned to his normal duties at Arecibo, though nothing felt normal anymore. The world slowly resumed its regular rhythm, though discussion of the aliens dominated every conversation. 6 months passed with no response. Some began to wonder if they had misinterpreted the signals. Others suggested the aliens had lost interest in primitive Earth. On a Tuesday morning, Richard was reviewing signal data when every alarm in the facility activated simultaneously. "What in the world?" he muttered, rushing to the main observation room. "Multiple objects approaching Earth," shouted Alex, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Massive objects, moving at incredible speed." Within hours, the objects were visible to telescopes worldwide. 7 enormous ships, each the size of Manhattan, decelerated as they approached Earth orbit. Fighter jets scrambled across the globe, but there was little they could do against visitors who had mastered interstellar travel. The ships took position around the planet, perfectly spaced, surrounding Earth like sentinels. For 3 days, they remained silent. Then, every electronic device on Earth, from smartphones to television stations, broadcast the same message simultaneously. "People of Earth, we are representatives of the Galactic Council, a union of 23 spacefaring civilizations. We have observed your development and determined that you have reached the threshold for contact. We come in peace and wish to welcome you to the galactic community." The message continued with instructions for Earth's leaders to prepare for the arrival of Ambassador Zorlak. As military personnel constructed a landing zone in a field outside Geneva, Richard watched the news with his wife Linda. "Do you think they're telling the truth?" she asked. "About coming in peace?" Richard squeezed her hand. "I hope so. But something doesn't feel right about all this." He couldn't have known how correct his instincts were. Ambassador William Carter adjusted his tie as the shuttle descended toward the enormous Galactic Council vessel. 3 weeks had passed since the arrival of Ambassador Zorlak, and Earth was still reeling from the revelation that humanity was just one species among thousands spread across the stars. "Remember, maintain composure no matter what you see," instructed Zorlak, whose blue-scaled skin glistened under the shuttle lights. "Many council species find human expressions unsettling." Carter nodded, glancing at his diplomatic team. Dr. Olivia Reeves, the security analyst, Professor Jack Wilson, the xenobiologist, and Susan Gomes, Earth's foremost physicist. They represented humanity's best hope for navigating this new reality. The council chamber was overwhelming. 12 different alien species sat in tiered seating around a central platform. Some appeared almost human, while others defied comprehension. Beings of crystalline structures, entities that seemed more gas than solid, and creatures with multiple limbs and eyes. "Delegates of Earth," announced the council leader, a tall being with iridescent skin. "We welcome you to the Galactic community. Your species has shown remarkable progress despite your isolation." The meetings that followed were a whirlwind of technological demonstrations and cultural exchanges. The council offered medical advancements that could eliminate cancer, propulsion systems that made interplanetary travel simple, and energy solutions that would end dependence on fossil fuels. "This seems too good to be true," Olivia whispered to Carter during one session. "They're offering everything and asking for almost nothing in return." "Perhaps they're genuinely altruistic," Carter replied, though doubt had begun to creep into his mind as well. The council's only requests seemed modest: permission to establish research outposts on Mars and Europa, access to study Earth's biodiversity, and mining rights to certain ocean floor regions deemed uninhabitable by humans. Back on Earth, the first wave of council technology began to arrive. Hospitals received medical devices that worked miracles. Universities gained access to educational databases containing centuries of advanced knowledge. The public embraced their new galactic neighbors with enthusiasm. Yet small concerns began to emerge. Council representatives always seemed to be present at high-level government meetings. The outposts on Mars grew larger than initially proposed, and the resource agreements, when studied carefully by Earth's best legal minds, contained clauses that granted the Council surprising authority. 6 months after first contact, Olivia Reeves accessed classified Council communications during a routine security assessment. What she found disturbed her deeply. "They don't see us as equals," she told Carter in his secure office. "Look at these internal classifications. Earth is categorized as a Stage 3 developing world, eligible for resource extraction and eventual integration." Carter frowned, studying the documents. What does integration mean in this context? Based on historical records of other worlds, it means we eventually become a fully controlled Council territory. They're colonizing us, just very slowly and politely. More evidence mounted. Council ships began arriving without proper notification. Their mining operations expanded beyond agreed boundaries. When Carter raised concerns, he was directed through endless bureaucratic channels that never yielded results. During a private dinner, Council Sub-Administrator Teknar had too much Earth wine and became unusually candid. "Your species is fascinating, William," the alien said, using Carter's first name. "Such potential, yet so naive. Did you really believe the Council travels across vast distances out of charity? Every Stage 3 world believes they're special. You'll adjust to reality eventually." That night, Carter called an emergency meeting with Earth's leadership. As Olivia presented her findings, the room grew tense. "They're not our benefactors," Carter concluded. "They're following a playbook they've used on dozens of worlds before us. The question is, what do we do now?" The president looked grim. "We prepare, quietly, and we don't let them know we're onto them." None of them realized how quickly the Council would abandon its pretense of peaceful cooperation. The betrayal came without warning on a clear Tuesday morning. Council ships descended on major cities worldwide, their massive hulls casting shadows over frightened populations. This was not the careful diplomatic approach of first contact. This was a show of overwhelming force. Ambassador Carter was in the middle of a video conference with global leaders when his aide burst into the room. "Sir, Council ships are landing in unauthorized zones. Hundreds of them." Carter's stomach dropped. "Get me Ambassador Zorlak immediately." But the communication channels to the Council embassy went unanswered. Outside his window, Carter watched as 3 alien vessels positioned themselves around the Capitol building. Across the globe, a similar scene unfolded. Council troops, armored beings never before seen by humans, deployed from the ships and began establishing perimeters. They carried weapons that resembled staffs but could disable electrical systems with a single pulse. When military forces in Beijing attempted to confront the invaders, their vehicles simply stopped working. Soldiers who fired conventional weapons found their bullets slowing and dropping harmlessly before reaching their targets. "This is a violation of all our agreements," Carter shouted when he finally reached Sub-Administrator Teknar. "Remove your forces immediately, or face the consequences." Teknar's expression remained neutral. "You misunderstand, Ambassador. The Council is implementing Phase 2 of planetary integration. Your world has valuable resources needed for the greater galactic community. We've simply accelerated our timeline." Reports flooded in from around the world. Council mining operations had expanded overnight, with massive machines deployed to oceans, forests, and mountains. The aliens were extracting rare minerals, water, and biological samples at an alarming rate. "They're stripping the planet," Dr. Susan Gomes reported during the emergency UN session. "At this rate, they'll cause irreversible ecological damage within months." When world leaders attempted to organize a unified response, they discovered their communications had been compromised. Council technology, once seen as gifts, had included subtle backdoors that now allowed the aliens to monitor and control Earth's networks. 3 days into the occupation, Council representatives addressed the United Nations. "Earth is now under the protective authority of the Galactic Council," announced Zorlak. His former diplomatic tone had been replaced by cold efficiency. "Resistance is both futile and unnecessary. Cooperate, and your people will be treated well." Several major cities were placed under what the Council called protective quarantine, force fields that prevented entry or exit. Citizens inside these zones reported that Council personnel were conducting medical examinations on humans without consent, collecting genetic samples, and removing certain individuals for advanced study. In Washington, D.C., Ambassador Carter found himself confined to his office, effectively under house arrest. Using a secure channel developed by Olivia Reeves before the invasion, he managed to contact scattered government officials. "We need to go underground," he told them. "The Council has technologies we can't match in direct confrontation. Our only hope is to organize, learn their weaknesses, and strike when they least expect it." In the Rocky Mountains, former Marine Captain Daniel Foster had already begun organizing a resistance cell. Military personnel who had escaped the initial takeover, along with civilians with useful skills, gathered at his remote compound. "They think we'll just roll over," Foster told his growing band of fighters. "They've done this before to other worlds. But they've never tried to conquer humans before." On the 30th day of occupation, the Council formally declared Earth a protectorate world, a bureaucratic term that masked the reality of colonization. Human governments still existed in name, but they served merely to implement Council directives. As night fell over a changed Earth, lights began to flicker in remote cabins, underground bunkers, and hidden facilities. The resistance was forming, communication by communication, person by person. The Council had technology, numbers, and experience subjugating planets, but they had underestimated humanity's fierce determination to remain free. Their mistake would prove costly. Lisa Chen wiped sweat from her forehead as she carefully removed the cover from the alien device. The underground lab was hot and poorly ventilated, but it was safe from Council detection. 6 months into the occupation, humanity had learned painful lessons about Council technology, including how their sensors could detect unauthorized gatherings. "Careful with that," warned John Blackwell, her research partner. Last time we tried to open one of their communication nodes, it nearly fried the entire electrical system. Lisa nodded, inserting a specially designed tool into the device. This time we're prepared. The insulation should prevent any feedback. The resistance had grown from scattered groups into a global network. Operating in small cells with minimal contact between them, they had established secure communication protocols using pre-digital methods. Courier systems, radio bursts too short to track, and even modified versions of ancient codes. In what was once a mining facility outside Denver, Captain Daniel Foster reviewed intelligence reports from around the world. The news was grim. Council extraction operations had intensified, with new processing centers appearing weekly. Humans who resisted were being relocated to education centers, detention facilities where many simply disappeared. "We need a game changer," Foster told his lieutenants. "These hit-and-run tactics are keeping us alive, but we're not making real progress." The room fell silent until communications specialist Kelly Martinez spoke up. "Sir, we've intercepted a council transport schedule. There's a scout ship landing near our western perimeter tomorrow. Small crew, minimal defenses." Foster's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting what I think you are?" "We've been studying their tech for months," Kelly replied. "If we could capture an intact ship." The operation was approved. 3 teams of 4 fighters, all with military backgrounds, positioned themselves near the landing site. Their weapons were primitive by Council standards. Conventional firearms modified with special ammunition designed by resistance scientists to penetrate alien armor. The scout ship arrived at dawn. As predicted, it had a crew of only 3 council members, collecting biological samples. The ambush was swift and silent. Within minutes, the resistance had captured their first alien vessel. "Don't touch anything until the research team arrives," ordered Lieutenant Steve Walsh, securing the unconscious aliens, "and check every inch for tracking devices." When Lisa and John arrived, they worked feverishly to understand the ship's systems. 3 days of non-stop effort yielded a breakthrough. "It's their communication protocol," Lisa explained to Foster, pointing at complex diagrams. "The Council relies on quantum-entangled channels for instant communication across vast distances. But there's a vulnerability. They only update encryption keys once every planetary cycle." John continued, "If we could access those keys, we could not only listen to their communications, but potentially insert our own commands." This discovery coincided with another piece of critical intelligence. Olivia Reeves, who had escaped Washington during the initial invasion, arrived at the base with information smuggled from a council facility. "They're vulnerable to certain frequencies," she explained, revealing stolen documents. "Their neural systems experience something like seizures when exposed to specific sound patterns. It's why they avoid Earth's oceans. Whale songs contain elements of these frequencies." Foster brought together his top people, Lisa, John, Olivia, and computer specialist Kevin Garcia. For weeks, they worked to integrate these discoveries into a cohesive plan. "We can't match their firepower," Foster told them, "but we might be able to blind and confuse them long enough to strike back effectively." Using the captured scout ship, Resistance members tested a prototype jammer that could disrupt Council neural functions. The results were promising. Council personnel within 50 meters became disoriented and unable to operate their equipment. Word spread through the Resistance network. Similar experiments began in cells across the globe. For the first time since the invasion, humanity had found a weakness they could exploit. "Send the message," Foster instructed. "Operation Thunderstrike is a go. All cells prepare for coordinated action in 14 days." The Resistance was about to show the Council that humans would not go quietly into subjugation. Kevin Garcia hadn't slept in 36 hours, but adrenaline kept him alert as his fingers flew across the keyboard. Around him, the command center of the Resistance's main base hummed with tense activity. Operation Thunderstrike would begin in 6 hours, and everything hinged on his team's ability to crack the final layers of Council security. "I need those command codes, Kevin." Captain Foster said, his voice steady despite the pressure. "Every minute counts." "Almost there," Kevin replied, eyes never leaving the screen. "Their encryption is complex, but the pattern we extracted from the regional headquarters is giving us the framework." 2 weeks earlier, a daring raid led by Lieutenant Walsh had captured vital Council data from their North American Coordination Center. 12 resistance fighters had died in the operation, but they'd secured something priceless: administrative access codes to the Council's communication network. Lisa Chen approached with a tablet displaying final modifications to their stealth technology. Over months of reverse engineering, the Resistance had discovered how to bend the Council's sensor technology against itself, creating blind spots in their detection systems. "The stealth systems are ready for deployment," she announced. "We've installed them on all 86 captured vehicles. They'll register as Council transports on their scanners." Foster nodded, examining the global map that dominated the center wall. Illuminated dots represented resistance cells worldwide, all awaiting the signal to begin the coordinated attack. "This is our only shot," he told his team. "The Council thinks we're just scattered bands of primitives." They'd grown complacent. The plan was audacious in its scope. Using the captured command codes, they would simultaneously disable Council communications across the planet. Then, Resistance forces would strike at extraction facilities, command posts, and orbital shuttles using weapons specifically designed to target Council weaknesses. "I've got it," Kevin suddenly shouted, pumping his fist in the air. "Full access to their command channel." The room erupted in cheers before quickly settling back to focused determination. Foster immediately began transmitting encrypted instructions to resistance cells globally. Each received specific targets and timing coordinated to their local situation. 3 hours before the operation, Olivia Reeves reported another crucial development. "The sound-based neural disruptors have been distributed to all major cells. Testing confirms 92% effectiveness against Council personnel." As 0 hour approached, Foster addressed the men and women preparing for battle. "Today we show the Council that humanity will not be their next colonized world. They came with technology beyond our understanding, but they made one critical mistake. They underestimated human ingenuity and our fierce drive for freedom." At precisely 300 UTC, Kevin executed the command that injected false data into the Council's global network. Across Earth, alien communication systems displayed all clear status while actually transmitting static. The attacks began with perfect synchronization. In Australia, Resistance fighters disabled extraction equipment that had been draining the Great Barrier Reef. Across Europe, neural disruptors incapacitated Council personnel at command centers. In South America, captured Council vessels struck at processing facilities with their own weapons. Council forces, accustomed to unquestioning obedience from primitive species, were completely unprepared for the coordinated assault. Their hierarchical command structure collapsed when headquarters couldn't communicate with field units. The Resistance's boldest move came from Foster's own team. Using the captured scout ship, now modified with additional weapons, they launched a direct attack on the Council's main orbital station. The small craft approached undetected, registered as a routine supply transport due to the hacked identification codes. "They're not even raising shields," reported the pilot, Lisa Chen, as they approached the massive station. "They have no idea we're coming." The assault on the orbital station was swift and devastating. Foster's team deployed neural disruptors throughout the facility, rendering the Council commanders helpless while Resistance fighters seized control of the station's communication array. Within hours, news of Earth's coordinated rebellion spread across Council communication channels to other star systems. The supposedly primitive humans had not only fought back, but had done so with a level of strategic brilliance that shocked the Council leadership. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council faced a species that refused to be conquered. The Council warship commander stared in disbelief at the main view screen as another of their orbital platforms erupted in flames. 7 Earth days had passed since the unprecedented human counterattack began, and the Council forces were still reeling from the shock. "Impossible," he muttered. "These primitives shouldn't have this capability." An alert sounded throughout the ship. Unknown vessels were approaching. Vessels using Council identification codes, but moving in patterns no Council pilot would use. Evasive maneuvers. The commander ordered, but it was too late. The human-piloted ships, captured during the initial strikes, swarmed his vessel. Neural disruptors deployed, incapacitating the crew before they could mount an effective defense. On Earth, Captain Foster reviewed the latest reports in the Resistance's new headquarters, the former Council Regional Command Center outside Geneva. The tide had turned dramatically. Over 60% of Council forces had been neutralized or driven off-planet. Those remaining were in disarray, cut off from their command structure. "Captain," called Olivia, excitement in her voice. "We're receiving a transmission. It's not from the Council." The message came from a species calling themselves the Nervash. Their ships had entered the solar system cautiously, monitoring the conflict from a distance. "The humans have accomplished what no other species has managed in 3 centuries, stated the Nervash representative, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms. "We wish to establish contact." Surrounded by his advisors, Foster met with the alien delegation. Security was tight. Humanity had learned harsh lessons about trust. "My name is Vosh," the lead delegate began. "The Nervash Confederation has suffered under Council domination for generations. We are not alone. Dozens of species across this galactic sector have been subjugated, their resources stripped, their cultures suppressed." Lisa Chen studied the data the Nervash shared. "They're telling the truth. The Council has been running a galactic empire, with most species reduced to client states or worse. We have watched your resistance with great interest," Vosh continued. "The Council believed your species would fall quickly like all others. Your successful counterattack has created opportunity." Ambassador Nicole Patterson, who had joined the resistance after escaping Council detention, took the lead in negotiations. Though still wary, she recognized the potential for alliance. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "Alliance," Vosh replied simply. "The Council maintains control through technological superiority and the isolation of subjugated worlds from each other. You have broken both paradigms. Your methods of countering Council technology could free dozens of worlds." The alliance formed quickly. The Nervash brought 5 other species into the coalition, each with their own grievances against the Council, each with unique capabilities. Earth provided its reverse-engineered technology and battle strategies. Within weeks, Council outposts across 3 sectors faced coordinated rebellions. Supply lines were disrupted. Council homeworlds, long insulated from the consequences of their expansion, suddenly found themselves vulnerable. Foster stood with Nicole Patterson aboard the Nervash flagship, watching tactical displays as Liberation forces reclaimed world after world from Council control. "They never expected this," Nicole observed. "Their entire strategy was based on the assumption that technologically younger species couldn't possibly challenge them." Reports arrived that the Council leadership had called an emergency session to address what they were now calling the human problem. For the first time in their long history of expansion, they faced a genuine threat to their dominance. The coalition forces pushed forward, growing stronger with each liberated world. Species that had been subjugated for generations provided crucial intelligence about Council weaknesses and infrastructure. Foster received word that the combined fleet was now ready for the final phase, a direct approach to the Council homeworld itself. "We're not seeking destruction," he told the coalition commanders. "We want justice and a new order based on mutual respect." The massive armada. Council ships captured and repurposed, Nervash cruisers, and vessels from a dozen liberated worlds, prepared for the jump to the Council's home system. At its heart was Earth's flagship, a former Council command vessel now renamed Defiance. As the fleet prepared to depart, Foster addressed the combined forces. "Today we bring the Council something they never expected from primitive species, an ultimatum. The age of exploitation ends now. The Council Grandmaster's ornate chamber fell silent as Captain Foster and Ambassador Patterson entered. Behind them stood representatives from 17 formerly subjugated species, including Karvosh of the Nerve Ash. The massive coalition fleet orbited the Council homeworld, a show of force impossible to ignore. "This is unprecedented," the Grandmaster said, her translucent skin pulsing with colors that betrayed her agitation. "No species has ever brought war to the Council homeworld." "We didn't bring war," Foster replied calmly. "We brought consequences." For 3 standard days, negotiations had proceeded under the shadow of the Coalition's military presence. The Council, accustomed to dictating terms from a position of absolute power, now found themselves forced to listen. "Your empire of exploitation ends today," Patterson stated, placing a data crystal on the table. "These are our terms, not negotiable." The crystal contained the framework for a new galactic order, one where all spacefaring species would have equal standing, where resource rights would be respected, and where technological knowledge would be shared rather than weaponized. "This is radical," the Council Minister of Expansion said, examining the terms. "You would undo millennia of established order." "An order built on subjugation," Karvosh countered. "The combined forces surrounding your world represent just a fraction of those you have oppressed. Accept these terms, or face judgment from all those you've wronged." The Council requested time for private deliberation. As the Coalition representatives waited in an antechamber, Lisa Chen analyzed data from sensors placed throughout the Council complex. "They're trying to stall," she reported. "I'm detecting energy buildups consistent with defensive systems activation." Foster nodded. "We expected this. Implement Operation Clarity." Throughout the Council chamber and surrounding government buildings, hidden devices activated, broadcasting the neural disruption frequencies that had proven so effective during Earth's liberation. Council security forces dropped to their knees, incapacitated by the invisible assault on their nervous systems. When the Coalition representatives returned to the chamber, they found the Council leadership in disarray. "Your deception proves our point," Patterson told them. "Even now, you cannot accept that you must treat other species as equals." With their security forces neutralized and the Coalition fleet in position to target key infrastructure, the Council had no choice but to sign the accord. The Galactic Council would be disbanded, replaced by an interstellar alliance where all member species would have equal representation. 3 months later, Earth hosted the first full assembly of the new alliance. Representatives from 29 spacefaring civilizations gathered in the rebuilt United Nations headquarters in New York. Some came from worlds that had suffered centuries of Council rule. Others were species that had maintained independence by hiding in remote regions of the galaxy. Foster, now Admiral of Earth's growing fleet, watched from the sidelines as Ambassador Patterson formally opened the proceedings. "We gather today not as conquerors or the conquered, but as equals," she declared. "Humanity's struggle for freedom became a catalyst for change across this sector of the galaxy. Now we must ensure that no species ever again faces the threat of exploitation and domination." The inaugural session established tribunals to address crimes committed by Council leadership. Reparations programs began for worlds stripped of resources. Most importantly, technological knowledge was freely shared among Alliance members, ending the deliberate suppression that had kept many civilizations dependent. Earth quickly gained a unique reputation in galactic society. Humans were recognized as fierce warriors when threatened, yet remarkably flexible in peace. Their rapid adaptation of alien technologies surprised even their allies. Within a year, human innovations had improved upon technologies the Council had considered perfected for centuries. As evening fell on the final day of the assembly, Foster stood on the balcony of the Alliance headquarters with Karvosh and Lisa Chen, looking at the stars now filled with new meaning. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when you were hiding in that underground lab?" Foster asked Lisa.